Would cities work better if people were more engaged in municipal politics? Given it's important in our lives, it's in some ways the most opaque level of government. John Tory is the former mayor of Toronto. Thanks for being with us.
Pleasure, Amanda.
I want your perspective on that first. It feels to me as though people pay the least attention to the city level, even though it is the one that affects our lives the most directly. Would you agree with that premise, first of all?
Well, I would say except when they need something. The kinds of things they're more likely to interface with government about is not so much their passport or not so much even something to do with the healthcare system, but did their trash get picked up? Did the police come? Does the fire department come? Does the transit system work? And so in that sense, I think people are very engaged with government, with that government, the local level of government, but not engaged in the context of policymaking or even where that government fits among the three, because that's a real problem where there just isn't the coordination and support for cities that there might be from the other governments.
Which is, of course, one of the things that makes these systems so interesting is the taxation difference and then the impact. And I guess you're right. We engage when we complain. But in terms of kind of actually having a say in how we're policed, how our garbage is picked up, we kind of wait till it's a problem. Let's go back to this kind of the sort of accountability, which is tied to taxation. Do cities have the powers to generate revenue that they should have that would actually force us to actually pay more attention to what's happening?
Well, I mean, there's two ways to do this. I mean, nothing is free. And if you're going to expect, as I believe you should, cities as the closest to the people to deliver services, because I think as we found in spades during the pandemic, the cities can most effectively deliver services directly to people. If you're going to do that, then you have to make sure they have the money to do it. And the money can come only in two ways. One is through taxation. And I think that property taxes and commercial taxes, which is really all cities can do, most cities, that's not good enough anymore. So you need to have either another tax vehicle or you need to have a fairer share of the revenue taken in by the other governments who have sources of taxation that grow with the economy, like the income tax, the corporate tax, or the sales tax.
Do you see any potential movement on that? I mean, that would involve another government giving up some of its own taxing power. So that would be, I guess, a tall order in some ways.
Well, I think it has to change because what you're seeing happen in this city, in this country, is more and more being asked of cities, I think quite properly, because they are the best at delivering services to people. But at the same time, you get these envelopes with the letters in them saying, here's another thing we want you to look after, but there's no check. And I think that none of these things are free. So I'm not so sure it's as much them giving up a share of their revenue as it is to say, if we're going to transfer responsibility to you, then we have to be fair and say that we transfer the money that goes with it. And I just think that's going to provide for a better functioning country, whether it's in housing or in transit or public safety, all the things people really care about these days.
Well, let's talk about that, because you ran the biggest, most complicated city in this country. In terms of what people do care about, where do you think, what's the priority that you would say should be in place for cities in terms of getting it right so that people enjoy living there?
Well, I think they have to have a healthy overall sort of existence, a quality of life that's healthy. I know that sounds like a kind of a trite phrase, but I think that kind of quality of life attracts investment, and investment creates jobs, and people need jobs. So, I mean, first and foremost, people need to have a job. And I think what follows from that is they need to have a place to live, hopefully affordable. They need to have a way to get around, which is the transit system. They need to feel safe, which is public safety. And I think those are the priorities of people. But the problem at the moment is municipalities are being asked to do more and more and more. And they're turning to tools like development charges, which are charges levied on people who build housing, to raise the money, which then in turn only makes housing more expensive. So that's why the solution has to rest somewhere else, other than just saying to municipalities, good luck delivering these services, making for safe, prosperous, investment-friendly communities with jobs, but say you're doing it on your own.
It's such a good point in terms of, promises being made. We'll make it less expensive to develop. But some of those charges are really important to supporting the infrastructure that goes to supporting those new communities. Similarly, people talk about law and order. Are we funding the apparatus of law and order properly, and where should that reside? Do you think other levels of government should take more accountability, or would that just result in an overstep into kind of city authority?
Well, this is part of the problem. You hit the nail right on the head. when you have the federal government even talking about, as happened when I was mayor, it's still happening today, getting involved in housing, you get sort of the braying and crying from provinces across the country saying, well, you can't, give money directly to cities. That's in our area of jurisdiction. I don't think that people care about jurisdiction or the Constitution. They care about getting housing built and some affordable housing being a part of that. And so I think in the end, people would welcome any government being part of this. Really what should happen, and it doesn't, is that all three governments should sit down together and have what I've always called a contract that says, well, fine, here's what somebody's going to do. You pick the level of government that delivers, and then we'll all three find a way to pay for it. We did it with a $40 billion transit plan that's happening in Toronto right now between Prime Minister Trudeau at the time, Premier Ford, and me. And we sorted that out. We just sorted out what's being built and how it's going to be paid for, and we all shared it. But there's far too little of that. And in fact, there's instances on housing where there are actually competing programs or programs that don't coordinate with each other that I think in a way stand in the way of all the money we have available being put to good use building housing, and in particular affordable housing.
I want to ask you, you did run the city of Toronto successfully as a mayor. If there's one thing you wish you'd been able to achieve, what would you say it is?
It probably would be what they call a new deal, as between all three levels of government, so that you could actually put aside all this constitutional mumbo jumbo and say, look, we're going to make it work in terms of housing, transit, public safety, and so on. And we're going to cooperate together on who does what and on how it gets paid for. And that all three governments recognize they have a responsibility, if you want to have healthy cities, which are, after all, where 80% of Canadians live, that you're going to have that kind of a sharing and maybe put aside the precise language of the Constitution to get stuff done. So
good to have you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amanda.
John Tory is the former mayor of Toronto. Time for the takeaway and the secret sauce of great cities. When it comes to urban centers that really thrive, it's safe to say they're as different as can be. There's simply no comparing London's historical glamour to New York's economic power. But what great cities do share is the pulse that drives them. And as tempting as it might be to say that is industry, that's also a short-sighted way of describing a thriving center. Of course, a healthy economy is the foundation of every great urban center so that people can work, but also because businesses on the top of their game are also innovating constantly. So the places they occupy become hotbeds of ideas and attract the kind of people who have them and who benefit from them. But to get good businesses to a city requires some really mundane things. That includes homes their employees can afford, schools their children can attend, a safe environment is table stakes, and an affordable housing market can be a game changer. Then there are the shared mundane things like decent roads and transit systems so the daily commute isn't a nightmare. Good hospitals and other emergency services are the kinds of things that fall under the heading of we don't consider them at all until they're the most important thing in the world. Smart cities know that keeping all of the underpinning of life humming will pay off. The trouble is that some of that investment isn't particularly easy to sell, especially those that are long-term and not very visible. But making it happen is the role of city governments and also their provincial leaders. It can be hard to see the direct line between rising crime in a city and a business decision not to invest, but the line is there, and it's a costly one when cities take their eye off the prize. My takeaway? Keeping a city in good shape takes effort, but keeping it a place attractive to business is one of the ways to make sure it's attractive to everyone else. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.